to introduce Richard. We're really fortunate to have him because he's gonna be short-lived at VAR. He's going to Lexington, Kentucky to be their head CEO.
Give you another quick call about.
Please us into his schedule, and he, I mean, we have been so fortunate to have him for what, 3 years?
Yeah, 3.5.
3.5 years, because he's known as the guru throughout the United States. So, I will.
So yeah, I'm here talking about the NAR settlement. You may have heard of it.
Some people haven't.
Some people may not, but you know, maybe, I was gonna say no shame if you haven't, but maybe a little bit of shame.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of shame. So I'm reusing a presentation here, so there's gonna be a lot of pages I'm just gonna skip. So just kind of bear with me on that, but the disclaimer I always start off with, I'm gonna be talking about some legal stuff in this, but it's just kind of help you understand it. I'm not a lawyer, never even played one on TV. Not interested in being one. I'm certainly not your lawyer. So any kind of legal issues, make sure you talk to them. I'm also not your qualifying broker. There's a couple places I'm gonna talk about things that are kind of getting that borderline of business practices to just, again, try to help you understand. But the way you actually do it is gonna be between you and Alex. So I'm neither one of those things. Don't treat me as that. Let me just kind of blow through this real fast.
You said it's rented out currently, right?
Folks online.
Okay,
Thanks, Steve.
got
You
it.
get your, once you get your slide.
Okay,
You're the
go
only
ahead.
one that hears that, Linda.
Yeah,
You're the
so
only one that hears that.
Here's what.
the people online that weren't muted.
Oh.
Okay,
All right, so basics of it, how we got here. $418 million settlement on March 15th from NAR. NAR does continue to deny any wrongdoing. And it includes some new rules from the MLS and that participants must enter into buyer agreements. I'm gonna note real quickly, I did not say buyer broker agreement, it's a different thing. We'll talk about more in a second. But kind of the 101 of it is we of course have a release of liability against NAR, all associations, all MLSs, and all members of NAR that are like at the member broker level. So there were some brokerages that if they have more than $2 billion in volume, they had to pay an additional amount. But even the members of those brokerages are still covered. So everybody falls under that umbrella. There's a new rule prohibiting offers of compensation on the MLS. I'll talk about them more later, but for starters, that is where the rule begins and ends. The only thing that is not allowed is offers of compensation on the MLS. Offers of compensation elsewhere, still totally allowed.
As long as it doesn't go to IDX. is my
As long as it's not on the MLS, right? Which again, I'll talk about the IDX thing later too. Written agreements, there's 4 things that have to be in the written agreement. Things that do not have to be in there are things like agency, level of service, length of time. Those do not have to be in the agreement by the MLS rules. And again, a lot more details, I'm just kind of starting at a high level. The settlement payment, $418 million of extortion over approximately 4 years.
Tell us how you really feel.
NAR has already said they will not be increasing dues for 2024 or 2025. President Kevin Sears, the NAR president, has been pretty clear and pretty serious about the fact that he does not want this amount to affect NAR members in any way. NAR has already started cutting a lot of things. If anybody's been involved with NAR before, knows that each year there's a presidential initiative that drives association staff crazy because every year there's something else you have to focus on. They've cut them. I don't know the budget for those. I do know it's 7 figures. So that's something they've cut right off the bat, that they're gonna stop doing. And that's just one example of them cutting some fat already. And then of course, denial of wrongdoing. And I'm gonna get a lot more into that later. So he hit the wrong button. All right, so compensation first off. Compensation is still available to brokers. You guys do a great job for consumers. You deserve to get paid for it, and it is still allowable. One of the possible outcomes if the settlement didn't happen would have been cooperative compensation going away. I think it's a pretty strong case that the DOJ still wants cooperative compensation to go away. Well, I'm gonna talk a lot more about DOJ too, but so you are still allowed to have a fixed fee commission paid directly by consumers, concessions from the sellers, portion of listing brokers compensation. I know there's some sort of like the way stuff is paid in New Mexico that comes into this that I don't know about, but bottom line, you can still get paid. One of the things I'd like to point out that NAR put out is this NAR one pager, and I meant to bring those big handouts with me, but I forgot them. So maybe you guys can email them out afterwards, but
We will.
on the front page of that handout, there's a QR code directly to this one pager for you. The only problem with this is it does use the dreaded A word of agent on it, so you'll have to have that conversation about how you're not an agent, you're a transaction broker. But otherwise, it's a pretty good resource that you can give to home buyers and sellers who have questions about the settlement. So that's a resource that NAR put out for you that's available on facts.realtor, or like I said, we have the QR code for it on that handout for you.
What was that little thing at the bottom? It said something about competition dot.
Yeah, competition.realtor. So competition.realtor is a website that just talks about commissions and what they do and what they don't do. So that's another website you can provide to consumers as well as competition.realtor. One of the things, give me a second. There's a point I usually make here and I had it, then I lost it. I'll get back to it. Okay, let's talk DOJ. I'm gonna start by talking about what the DOJ thinks about our industry. And I'm actually talking about a case here. This is No Select versus MLS PIN. That's not related to the settlement. This settlement was for the Sitzer case, not for this one. But for those of us who are following this case for the last 5 or 6 years, I think it was going on. The DOJ kept poking their nose in all kinds of different places saying, that's not good enough, that's not good enough, that's not good enough. And what's driving us insane is they never told us what the heck they wanted. In this case, they finally told us what they wanted. And in this case, this is a snippet from it. Is they talk about, as long as sellers can make buyer broker commission offers, they will continue to offer customary commissions out of fear that buyer brokers will direct buyers away from listings with lower commissions, a well-documented phenomenon known as steering. So to the DOJ, not saying I agree with them on this, but to the DOJ, sitting down and saying, hey, look, all of these houses sold for 3%. So if you don't offer 3%, people aren't going to show your house. According to the DOJ, that is steering. I think there's a little more gray than that. I have some disagreements with the way they look at it, but according to the DOJ, there it is, black and white, what they think steering is. Another part of this thing that stands out to me is they spend about 3 pages talking about the industry's history of resisting commission competition. One of the things you will never hear me say is that commission has always been negotiable, because that's not true. Commission continues to be negotiable, is what you'll hear me say. And the reason I say that is because up until 1950, NAR did set commissions. They actually had commission tables, and it was against the code of ethics to offer anything outside of that table. In 1950, they lost an antitrust case, and the DOJ spends 3 pages belly aching about how it took them 20 years of suing the industry repeatedly to get the industry to stop doing that. So the message I get from that is the DOJ doesn't want to do that again. So one of the things I'm going to talk about in here is kind of helping people have a bit of a mind shift. There's going to be a shift from the old way and the new way is what I'm going to call it. And that's because, frankly, we don't want to be in this same boat again 5 years from now. It'd be really nice to have another 50 to 70 years of the DOJ not on our case. So, and the only way to do that is if we as an industry shift the way we think about commissions. That being said, there's people out there who are saying things like, oh, the DOJ is just going to torpedo this settlement. It's not true. They can't. They have no power to it. The DOJ can submit a statement of interest, but they have no power to change or prevent or anything else with this settlement. As of right now, the plaintiffs, the defendants, and the judge are all on the same page. There is literally no reason the settlement should not go through. So if anybody starts saying that, just slap them or something. All right. So now, and the way this is working is I'm kind of starting high level, and then I'm going to kind of go middle where I have some frequently asked questions I've heard, and then we'll get into some real detail. So you're going to kind of hear the same stuff almost repeatedly, but I want to dig in. So this is some of the frequently asked questions that we get. The first one is, why settle? So I want to take a step back for a second. I'm going to talk about this second question. Why didn't NAR talk about the pro-competitive benefits of buyer broker compensation? Short answer is they did. I actually am good friends with Rodney Ganshow. He's the NAR director engagement for, the vice president of director engagement for NAR. And he's the one who took the stand. He was the one who was on the stand in the Sitzer trial to talk about the pro-competitive benefits of buyer broker compensation, to try to defend first time home buyers, veterans, you know, all these things that we've heard over and over and over again. He was there. He's the one who was on the stand and did it. However, this is where we're starting getting the legal stuff. Again, not a lawyer, but there's two ways an antitrust case can be heard. One is called per se, the other one is called rule of reason. The, under a per se analysis, it says that the evidence of collusion is so egregious that you are not even allowed to talk about the pro-competitive benefits of that collusion. And the judge in this case determined that that was true. Literally everybody except that judge and the plaintiffs disagree with him. The Supreme Court has come out and has said that essentially the level of per se that federal judges should use should be like you have a video recording of a bunch of mobsters smoking cigars in a back room agreeing to something. That didn't happen because it didn't exist, but the judge still did that. And that's essentially why we lost. If you've ever been sued, you've ever been in court, you know that even if the law is 100% on your side, you still lose 25% of cases. This was in the 25%. So then why settle? Why not appeal? Right? Oh, and one more point on per se. I don't know the exact number, but it is a very, very, very low amount of cases that are ever heard on per se. It's like less than 10%. All the rest fall in rule of reason. So then why not appeal? You know, everyone's like, okay, well, fine, appeal. We have such a strong case, which we still think we do. Why not appeal? The damages were so high in this case, in order to appeal, we would have had to post a $4.8 billion bond. This industry doesn't have that money. That would have immediately bankrupted every association in MLS in the country. Wasn't an option. So the fact that NAR got this settlement, despite the fact that it sucks, is a good thing. It's also why you're a member of NAR, because now you're protected under this. So let's keep going through the FAQs on this. It's final. We need to wait and see. I kind of already talked about this. It's going to happen. Yes, it's not technically going to be finalized until November, but all of the rules go into effect at the date of class notice. The date of class notice is August 17th. Anybody who is still practicing against this settlement as of August 17th is taking yourself out of the settlement and opening yourself to liability. So that's why everybody is implementing as of August 17th. We're actually doing August 1st for reasons I'll explain later. So advertising commission on the NLS. We get a lot of questions. Can we just call it something different? Can we put it in showing time? Can we make the last 3 digits of the listing price the compensation? Guys, I've heard them all. I promise you. I've seen the memes. Stop that. The answer is no. I mean, just bottom line, no. One of the things we're working on now is we know the last 6 months of this year is going to be a giant game of whack-a-mole. We're figuring out where the holes are. We're figuring out what the hammers are, and we're getting ready to chase them down. So I'm going to talk a lot about that mind shift, but just don't. It's time to move on. And we'll talk about that new shift. Concession field. This has come up a lot this week and last week because Santa Fe Association of Realtors has determined they are going to do a concession field in their MLS. Now, we're not, for a couple of reasons. One, I'm going to take a step back and we're going to say, okay, this field wasn't important enough for us to have it before. And then a settlement happens and now we have to have it. Does that look great? That doesn't look great, right? So we do have a field called seller assist offered. It's a yes/no field. We've had it in there for 6 or 7 years. That's going to remain. So if your seller is willing to assist with the closing of the property, click yes. Now, whether that means compensation or whether that means a carpet allowance or whether that means they just have a pot of money and they don't care as long as it closes. Click yes. That's what we have. So the other part of this is, and this is kind of starting that mind shift. I want you to stop thinking about the broker to broker, I need to know what I'm getting paid mentality and start thinking about what's the consumer think of this. If I'm a seller and I have $20,000 that I'm willing to put towards closing a transaction, I don't necessarily want to advertise that. Because if the seller only needs $10,000 to close a transaction, I might be leaving money on the table.
You mean it's a buyer?
Well, yeah, the buyer only needs 10,000. Then I might be leaving money on the table. So that's the That's why I'm not a fan of the concession field. Because you're gonna go to your seller and you're gonna be like, okay, so how much can I put in the MLS that you're willing to put down to make this deal happen? Like, that's not information people wanna share. Right? So that's why we're not doing the concession field. Along this, however, we are gonna have the historical data. So listings that closed prior to August 1st are still gonna have the compensation that property had listed on. Additionally, when you're closing out properties, even after August 1st, you can still put the compensation amount in the seller comments, because that's important information to have to know how to evaluate the value of the property, right? Again, the rule is you cannot have offers of compensation in the MLS. That's where the rule starts, that's where the rule ends, no more, no less. So you can still put it in the selling comments and talk about that, so you will still have that information in your MLS. Any questions on that? That's a good point. Kind of stop for a second. Yes.
Well, it might not be to this, but who are gonna be the cops for this?
The MLS, it's a great unfunded mandate. Yeah,
And are you also gonna be the cops for the buyer agreement?
yes, we are, which I'm gonna talk about. Today.
Okay, that's my big question.
Oh, yeah, nice unfunded mandate from the settlement, so thank you for that, NAR. All right, so let's talk about the agreements, and I promise I do get to the compliance of this later. So that agreement that we're gonna talk about, I'm gonna tell you what the 4 things are, but again, it does not address agency. It does not address level of service, and it does not address length of time. You can do a service for a single property, a single day, a single weekend, it doesn't matter. So those things are not part of this buyer agreement. So again, just clearing out rumors, getting rid of FAQs out of the way before we dig into the details. Can you show your own listing without a written agreement? Yes, because you're not representing the buyer, you're representing the seller. That's different. Now, if you start to represent the buyer and you go into dual agency, that's a different story. Talk to a qualifying broker, because a lot of qualifying brokers don't like dual agency. I don't like dual agency. But so that's when things change a little bit. But if all you're doing is showing an open house, you don't have to be like, no, you can't come in the house until you sign a piece of paper. That's ridiculous. That's not what's happening here. The only thing I'll really say on loans, because I am not a loan expert, is, again, NAR fought for you, and VA is going to be allowing commissions as part of their loans now. Fannie and Freddie have both come out and said that commissions are not going to count against interested party contributions. Those are both things that NAR accomplished because they have enough size and power on Capitol Hill to be in the rooms to have those conversations. So again, I'll be completely honest, there's also parts of this, I'm not happy with NAR either on some things, especially their marketing of it. But there's still good reasons to be members of it. Paying the settlement we talked about already, and I'm gonna just kind of fly through this screen here, because this doesn't really apply to what we're doing here. So now we're gonna start getting into the actual details. Any questions on high level stuff before we dig in? Stop there for just a second. Need water. All right, so here's the changes. As of August 1st, there's 3 fields in the MLS that are gonna go away. It is the unconditional comp, the variable rate commission, and the comp comments. Those 3 go away. If your listing is in pending or active at that point, the data in it is also gonna go away. There's no action required on your part. That's all just disappear. Closed listings that closed prior to August 1st, that information is still gonna be there, because there's gonna be kind of a point in time difference, right? You're gonna have to look at the before times and the after times and be able to tell what the pricing is to do appraisals and comps and things like that. The second part is, the MLS cannot create, facilitate, or support any listing information to website which lists compensation, although it's kind of worded poorly, because you can do it on your own website. So, if you have Office A can have all of its own compensation on its website. Office B can have all of its on its own website. However, if you try to create a website that has Office A and Office B, we now have to cut off your IBX fee. So what the rule is trying to accomplish, again, the spirit of the rule, is they don't want the MLS to facilitate somebody else recreating the old MLS. That's what they're trying to do. That's the spirit of it. So that's the difference there with the IDX feeds that I think Linda asked you, somebody asked.
I did.
Yeah, so as you can't combine more than one office on a website. Now, I'm trying to remember, do you have multiple office IDs here, or do you just have one big one?
No, we have not.
Yeah, so That's kind of the trick right now, and the board of directors is still discussing this, where it is by office ID. Similar to the way clear cooperation is handled, where you can't share across office IDs, that's still true of the IDX feeds as well. Could change. There's a lot of discussion happening about that, but that is the way it is right now. Cooperative compensation is still allowed. You are still able to pay other brokers, you are still able to pay the buyer's broker. You are still able to advertise it any way you want outside of MLS. If you wanna do smoke signals, if you wanna have a plane fly over, you wanna put it on a billboard, go for it. Nothing prohibiting you from that. It just can't be on the MLS. And then of course, the written agreement. So let's get into some actual red lines now, so you can see what the actual words are. So the rule about offers of compensation is just this: participant subscribers or their sellers may not make offers of compensation to buyer brokers and other buyer representatives in the MLS. Pretty straightforward, pretty clear. No offers of compensation in the MLS, period. And that does include all other MLS products like Showing Time or Supra or anything else for that matter. The second part was what I talked about with you cannot have a website that has compensation for multiple brokers. Again, it's pretty clear in the language. I think I've already explained it pretty well. The second one is, but both of these pages are basically sellers and buyers, as often as possible, should be told that commissions are not set by law and are negotiable. I'm assuming NMAR is plastering this all over a lot of their forms, at least I hope so. Because the term they use is, and any pre-closing disclosure documents, which is a really vague and broad term. But I can tell you, the MLS is not gonna be like, hey, this one single piece of paper didn't disclose it, so you're gonna get a fine. Like, we're not doing that, right? Just as long as your buyers and sellers know, and you're disclosing it as often as possible, you're gonna be in good shape. So this isn't a rule I even spend a whole lot of time on, because that's really all it's saying. Here's one that matters: the written buyer agreement. So the 4 things that have to be in it, and really the 3 of them are kind of all one. So the 4 things are, you have to set the, disclose the amount or rate of compensation you're going to receive. The second thing is it has to be objectively ascertainable and not open-ended. So you cannot say things like 3% plus whatever bonus is offered, or whatever seller is offering. Can't say that. It has to be a percentage or a dollar number. And then the third thing is that number is the ceiling. So you set a number that is objectively ascertainable and not open-ended, and that number is your ceiling. So that's 3 of the 4 things right there. And then the 4th thing is just you disclose that commissions are not set by law or never negotiable, which was kind of already mentioned in the one before. And that's it. That's the only thing that's required. So the way we are doing compliance with this is the MLS right now already has the authority to ask for your listing agreement at any time. If we think you have a listing that's active that you don't have an active listing agreement on, or something that's going funny with it, we can ask you for it. It's reactive. Same thing, if it's reported to us that somebody thinks you don't have a written buyer agreement, we can request it from you and you have to be able to produce it. That's how
There's
we're
gonna be rats out there, aren't there?
Exactly. So here's how I see it going down. You're negotiating and you're in this process, and the listing side says, I don't think they have a buyer listing agreement. I'm gonna go over here to the buyer broker and be like, you need to turn over your buyer listing agreement to show that you have it. I'm gonna look at it, I'm gonna go back to the listing broker, and I'm just gonna say, it exists. I'm not gonna give them any information about what's on it, because that's private information, right? But it exists. And that's how the compliance is gonna work on. And so how much that happens, we'll see, again, unfunded mandate. But for violations of these rules, so like if you don't have a broker agreement, or you try to squeeze it into the MLS somewhere where you're not supposed to, things like that, that's gonna fall under the major violation sections of our rules. So the first fine is $250, the second time is $500, the third time is $750. And on the third time, it goes to a tribunal of the compliance committee who can levy additional sanctions and fines. And those additional sanctions and fines can go up to $5,000, up to a 30-day suspension of MLS privileges or required education. Actually, I should say and, because it could be any combination thereof. So that's how the compliance is going to work. For the MLS side, we have listing data checker already set up to detect stuff that's not supposed to be there. And then on the Briar broker side, it's gonna be reactive and we will see what happens. There's gonna be a little bit of building airplanes while flying them here, gonna be completely honest with you. But honestly, once I talk more about the mind shift that needs to happen, I don't think it's gonna be as bad as it is. So, but we'll get that in a second. All right, what's my next slide here? I don't think any more of these slides actually matter too much. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna throw that up for now. Well, actually, let me say this real fast. Our implementation of all this is August 1st. And the reason we're doing August 1st is it gives us a 17-day period to educate people. Because if we launch it August 17th and then somebody breaks the rules August 18th, we're too late. They've now taken themselves out of the settlement and opened themselves to liability. So we want to have a 17-day period of, we're gonna get the phone calls, hey, what happened to the compensation field? What lawsuit? So we have.
Oh, that'll happen.
It's going to happen.
Going to happen.
It's absolutely going to happen. Yeah,
110%.
so we want that 17-day period to be an education period for the members to help protect themselves from themselves.
Protect themselves from
So
themselves.
that's why we have that there, and then, I'll just put this back up on talking, so.
Don't call me. Just saying it out loud.
All right, so let's talk mind shift a little bit. One of the things I keep hearing is like, oh, so I guess we're just gonna have to call every single listing broker and ask what they're offering now, right? Here's your mind shift. You don't need to know how much they're offering. I'm gonna stop for a second. I got settled. You don't need to know. And I'm gonna pull something up here real fast. I don't have it on the screen, but I'll just read it to you. There's a broker that I really like following, what he does just with social media and stuff like that. And he says this: if a buyer agent calls you and asks if the seller is willing to offer compensation or concessions, just repeat the following. Our seller is willing to entertain any and all requests for offers of compensation or concessions and put it in the purchase agreement. So the point to make there is, anybody ever had more than one, well, I'll just say more than one seller who cared about something other than their net?
Yes.
That's what the seller cares about, is their net, right? I mean, you might have a couple here or there that are altruistic or something, I don't know, but they care about their net. Whether the compensation is 3% or 50%, doesn't matter. What their net is what matters. So just like, another thing I'll say is people are like, oh, well, you know, if I call and my buyer agreement says it's gotta be 3%, but then I call them and they're only offering 2%, then, you know, and I need to know that. It's like, take that sentence. Everywhere you said the word commission, take that out and put in the word carpet allowance instead. You're already doing it. It's just another lever as part of the negotiation. So the other thing that comes up, okay, so we sign an agreement for X% and we go to a new builder and the new builder is offering X% plus a $4,000 bonus. Every piece of paper in law that is signed by two people can be amended by those same two people. But what has to happen is the conversation. So you're gonna go to that buyer and you're gonna say, hey, they're offering me a $4,000 bonus. That would be really nice. You know, I would love to pay for my kids' dance recital with that. But they're like, you know, I think you're doing a great job, and I think you deserve to be paid more, but I could use some of that for my closing costs. You have a conversation, you agree on where it lands. I had one person at one of these other meetings that's like, hey, I'll throw in a Ring doorbell if they let me get the bonus, you know, and you know, that's fine. That's negotiation. That's what it is. But you have a conversation, both sides agree to it, you amend it, and then you go from there. And I think if we think about it that way, and we take a step back from the way things were happening, that's probably how it should have been all along. So that's that mind shift to have I'm talking about, is rather than thinking about what's better for the broker in the transaction, what's better for the buyer and seller in the transaction. Not saying anybody's always, no, like, I don't believe realtors are these scum of the earth people who are all out for themselves. I do not believe that. I think anybody who does is stupid, quite frankly. But that's the mind shift to have here is, you know, a realtor is a part of every home's story, but they're not the story. The buyer and seller in the story. So that's where, you know, have your agreement with your buyer. You and your buyer know what you've agreed to be paid over here. And then on the other side, you and the listing member and the seller know how much the seller is willing to contribute out of their net to help close the deal. In the middle is a negotiation. So Couple things that help with that, if you haven't seen them yet, is NAR has a designation called accredited buyer representative. They're offering it for free this year. Highly recommend getting that. Another one that isn't free, but is still a good one, is called real estate negotiation expert. That's another one that's a good one to have. And then if you don't want to do a designation, there's a book. Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. It's a great book. It really teaches you negotiation. So that's what to put in your tool belt right now. Get better at negotiating, because that's what things are gonna look like going forward. So that's what I have for the presentation. From this part, I just like to open it up for questions, because I've said a lot of things, we put out a lot of stuff, we put out a lot of videos. But there's people in this room that until you ask your question your way, you're not gonna be satisfied. So this is that time. And then after that, I'll dig into some value prop stuff for NAR. Yeah, go ahead.
So the part about the open house isn't necessary to have the buyer
Mhm.
disclosure, let's call it.
Mhm.
And you're showing your own listing. Where is that? Where was that gotten from? That idea?
I think just common law would be my answer. Because you're representing the seller, you're not representing the buyer. Now, once you get to the point you are representing the buyer, it's a different story. But yeah, I mean, that's from NAR. NAR's, that's on Backstar Realtor. They answered it.
Okay.
And you're talking about your listing, but another broker can hold my listing open with no issue because it's broker's listing.
Within the same brokerage, correct? Yes, exactly. Yes.
Going back to what we were talking about, the seller, the comments in the seller section. So basically, what I kind of understood is after you close a transaction, you can go in there as like the listing agent and say, you know, whatever notes you want, and then say, you know, seller contributed
Yes.
3% to, and that's why, or maybe, okay, sold in 2 days. And then
Absolutely.
another one was 100 days and.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, like when it comes to that selling comment section, I can't get any two realtors in a room to agree on what's the closing cost or not, much less 12 that's on the policy committee or board of directors. So what I tell people is just detail it, explain all of it, and whoever is making the appraisal or comp can make their own decision on whether they want to count it against the sale price or not. So that's my same message when now the compensation is part of it. Yes.
Is there gonna be a compliance checker for LOSO remarks?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
like builders that say no GRT,
Mhm.
so that gets taken out.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so we are building listing data checker to look at remarks and LOSO remarks. And I've basically given it a list of like 35 words that are similar to, I use the thesaurus and ChatGPT. And just came up with a huge list, and it's gonna be detecting those words. So
Okay.
yes, absolutely. What else? Go ahead.
On the buy broker agreement, you said it has to be a specific number of percent, right? So can we not put the amount plus GRT? Do we have to specify what the GRT is?
That is a great question I have not had yet. I think if you say plus GRT, that's an ascertainable number. That's not open-ended, right? Because depending on where it's purchased is where the number comes from, right? So that's an ascertainable number. I think that's fine. Just thinking out loud.
Shouldn't assume that it's already in there if we put a percentage.
Yeah, you're probably right. That's a good call. I had not had that question yet. Yes.
I have a question with regard to teams, right?
Uh-huh.
Is there a way to sign a buyer broker agreement with the team? Because like, let's say I have a buyer and I'm not available to show a house, and this is one of the benefits of working with the team, right? Can Chris now go show my house at where I'm the same team? as my buyer?
That's a really good question. My initial response, and I'm gonna let the commissioner in the room correct me if I'm wrong, is that a team is not a legal entity, not a licensed entity.
Yes.
So I would think the answer would be no, but
So how do you?
what do you think? Any input on that one?
This question's being brought up with regard to team task force.
Yeah.
New rules, and that is a question. Can
Yeah.
a team sign a contract? We don't have jurisdiction
Yeah,
over contracts. But
that's a good one.
that's a big question.
Yeah, again, building airplanes offline them, right?
Yeah, more than one agent on a buyer broker agreement then?
I mean, that kind of works the same way of a listing agreement. If a seller has two different listing agreements and the house sells, guess what? They have two different people to pay. Of course, the question becomes is how far you want to take that in court. But that's true of any piece of
I
paper.
guess you could also amend it too, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know how you handle that, teams. That's a solid question.
And that's probably a good thing for for us to discuss in the task force today,
Mhm.
because the rules haven't started becoming discussed yet, but
So can
being
you
formulated.
write in, like, some sort of addendum or amendment stating other brokers that are within the team?
I'm gonna punt that one to Ashley.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't feel comfortable asking questions right now. I mean, I would think so, but yeah, ask Ashley. Yeah, that's a good one too. Two good questions. What else? I can't do that, come on.
Well, okay, at one point you said brokerage A can have, this is the pay.
Mhm.
And brokerage B can have it, but you can't put the two of them together.
Correct.
Yet you said later that like, could Keller Williams, could our office say, this is all of our listings and this is our.
So the way that Southwest MLS currently defines what a brokerage or an office is based on the office ID. So like, I don't know if these are correct or not, but I'll use KWLR 1 and KWLR 2. It is, okay. So the way it sits right now, KWLR 1 people should not share information about a property with KWLR 2, or it would be a violation of clear cooperation. Same thing is true of putting these commissions on your website. A KWLR 1 and KWLR 2 cannot have a shared website that has both conversations on it. Again, that's being discussed, could change, where it's more of a trade name instead of a office ID, but the way it's currently defined, it's the way it is. Yeah.
I just think that does need to change.
Talk to your Southwest MLS Board of Directors representatives. Yes.
It's actually on page 28 of the settlement agreement, which gets to Steve's question about, which becomes then a statutory legal question.
Uh-huh.
Says unless inconsistent with state or federal law or regulation before or during the operation of paragraph 58.6 of this settlement agreement requires that all Realtor MLS participants working with a buyer enter into a written agreement before the buyer tours any home. So unless inconsistent with state or federal law, so I guess that would go back to our state law about contracts.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's actually that verbiage isn't actually in the rules. So
Yeah.
thanks for that. That's, it's because, yeah, it does talk about the enter an agreement with the buyer. So it's just, it's, when you start talking about team, the definition of participant gets kind of squishy, right?
Mhm.
Because there are some states where a team is a licensed entity, and there's some states that's not. Ours is one of the ones that's not. So.
Right.
Or not even just teams, but like brokerage, like if I'm out of town, I'm not on a team, but I could call
Shelley.
Julian and say, hey, Julian, are you in town? Like,
Right.
show my property or this property. That's just
And then they would just do a buyer broker for that particular property.
for that.
So.
But then it goes back to operate, and I'm like, oh crap, I didn't have to buy it.
Right, so it's like when you just said, just got my juices flowing a little bit. So it does say in the rule here MLS participants, so. And if you look at this in like the qualifying broker, associate broker type level, a qualifying broker is a participant. An associate broker is a subscriber. So here it's saying MLS participants working with the buyer, so I wonder, this, do not quote me on this is a Ashley question for sure. If, as long as somebody in the participant's office that's signed, if it would be okay. Because it says participant there, not participant and subscriber.
But is that just our language or is that a national standard for that word?
That's the national standard, that's the, yeah.
Participant.
So what NAR does, because NAR has this fun job of trying to make MLS rules that fit all 50 states. When some states are agency states, some states are transaction broker states. So what they do is they have, their definition is participant and subscriber. So in our state, a participant is a qualifying broker, a subscriber is an associate broker. In other states, the participant is the broker and the subscriber is the agent. So that's how they kind of create a catch-all. So that makes me start to think it'd be okay. But again, building airplanes offline, I reserve the right to be wrong on that one.
Maybe it'll say something in the order, when the order is finally,
Maybe,
yeah.
maybe. I'll say,
It's a broker that's negotiating the contract, that's representing the buyer.
right,
No, it's the listing, it's the Keller Williams, the listing agreement, it's Keller Williams.
right,
And we need to.
yeah,
That's who I'm talking
yeah, these are all Ashley questions. Not to Ashley.
Richard, look at.
Yes,
We have private collection, which is where we can put either buyers or sellers, buyers or properties into private collection up until the point it goes into MLS.
Mhm.
So would you say on that, we can advertise the price or the commission?
within private collection, yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, cause as long as it's not on the MLS, I
Right.
have no control over it.
It would be before it gets to MLS.
Right, right. Yeah, I have no control over it anyway. And even once it's in the MLS, if you have your own internal system or you wanna, again, billboards or whatever, I have zero control over it. Yeah, it's just in the MLS. So another thing to think about there is like, there's a Burger King and a McDonald's next to each other. McDonald's dropped the price of their burger to $3. Burger King wants to compete and they do a buy one, get one free offer. There is nothing anybody can do to stop that. That is a constitutionally protected right. That's just how business works, right? So the idea of saying that you can't advertise your commission at all is a little ridiculous. However, I do go back to that mind shift of, I think we're gonna get to a point where you're not gonna need it. So I think a lot of the belly aching about how we're gonna advertise it is a bit overblown. Because the answer is literally, put it in the purchase agreement. It's that simple. And then it's just another negotiation. Now, of course, you have to be able to sell your value prop. And along with that value prop, I think there's actually a world where people who are really good at this get paid more. You know, because again, if we look at the old way, whether it was your first transaction or your 3,000th transaction, you got paid the same exact thing.
Mhm.
If we take a step back, should that have been true? Because that's not true in any other business, right? So I think there's a world where if you're on your 3,000th transaction, you might command more. And that's where the negotiation's gonna come. So that's one of the ways that. And I don't say this lightly, I don't say this as hyperbole, I think this settlement might end up being the best thing to ever happen to our industry. Because of that fact, first off, both sides are a lot more aware of who's being paid and how they're being paid, which is a good thing. Another point I always make is show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. When I worked in the call center world, if you wanted average handle time to get better, you put a bonus on it. It got better. Issue resolution and transfer rate might get worse, but average handle time got better. And then the next month you move it to the next thing and then the other stats change, right? So same deal. So the incentive to this point has all been on the listing side. So if you look at all the trainings, all the books, all the products, all the technology, it's like 80% heavy listing side right now. I guarantee you there are hundreds of rooms of nerds working on stuff for the buyer side now that we're not working on before, which is going to drive a lot of innovation on that side of the business that does not exist previously.
Right.
So between that innovation piece and then both sides being more open and transparent, I legitimately think this might be the best thing that ever happened to us. It's gonna be hard in the meantime. You have to adapt to change. But yeah,
Does this affect non-realtors?
no, it does not. And also only realtors are covered by it. So,
What if not, what if just real estate licensees started their own? So I just saying.
I think they should talk to a lawyer. Cause even though it's only affecting realtors, there's still a precedent that's been set. So if you go open up an MLS as a non-realtor MLS and you're gonna start posting compensation on it, I think there's a lot of lawyers out there who would be licking their chops.
Just asking.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, it's a true statement.
Rhetorical
But
question.
I think the MLS it's called the flywheel effect. We have a good flywheel effect where we have the majority of the data, vast majority of the data. And we have a great flywheel going where there's more data coming in, more data going out. That's gonna be hard to stop. So I mean, we actually have a competing MLS in Albuquerque right now. Anybody know what it's called? No,
No.
Zillow.
no, no.
New Mexico.
Nope.
No, not that one.
I mean, there's New Mexico MLS, but I don't think they're a real competitor. But I mean, you're kind of proving my point. Like, it's called Decentropy X. And like I said, it's existed in Albuquerque for over a year now, but nobody's heard of it because they don't have a flywheel. So, which actually brings me to kind of the next thing I wanted to talk about, if you guys will humor me
I had
on
a
it, but go
question.
ahead.
About, you had mentioned that now it can be put in the purchase agreement, you know, for many, many years, we've always said the purchase agreement is between the buyer and the seller. Commission is paid by buyer or the seller or the buyer, so now we can put it into the purchase agreement.
Right, so, I don't remember which article it is in the Code of Ethics. I want to say it might be 12, but there's one that talks about you cannot alter the compensation as part of the purchase agreement. That's what you're referring to, right? I think that rule's gonna change. I think come NAR NXT this year, you're probably gonna see a change in the verbiage of that. But B, even with the way it's currently worded, the intent of it was that you're not modifying the compensation on the sly. You're not trying to pull a fast one. You know, that was the real spirit of it. It wasn't that you can't change it because negotiation continues to be negotiable, right? It always has been since 1950. But what it really was you're not like, oh, well, here, sign this and don't read page 2. You know, that's the intent of that article in the Code of Ethics. Yes, it can be changed in the purchase agreement. And now I know there's something that goes with New Mexico law that plays into that I've heard people bring up that I don't quite understand, but yes, it is allowed. It's allowed.
How would it be worded?
That's
You can use the word compensation, you can say,
as long as it's not in the MLS, absolutely. Compensation is not a dirty
but
word.
then that does put us into the contract. I was gonna ask that same question now.
But it's not
But-
MLS.
We're a party to the contract.
Yeah, and that's where I'm hoping NAR Forums is having all these discussions and figuring that out, because that's way over my head. Because, but it's just like, the other thing to point out is, up until this point, the unconditional compensation was the one part of the MLS that was considered binding, right? So like, look at refrigerator. Anybody in the room ever bought a refrigerator because the MLS said it, but the purchase agreement didn't? Yeah, there's always a couple, right? Same is true with the compensation. What matters is what's in the purchase agreement. Doesn't matter what the MLS said. The MLS is not a legal document. It might be Exhibit A, but it is not a legal document. So that's the other thing to kind of shift here, and it just needs to be in the purchase agreement. The two sides are gonna figure it out from there. Yeah.
So what we were talking about before with people going on vacation or whatever and having somebody show property on their behalf. So that means that a buyer can sign a buyer agreement with more than one broker. And that's okay.
So my interpretation, literally just based on our conversation in this room, so I reserve the right to be wrong, is that when one of you signs one, you're signing with your participant, which is Alice. So anybody under Alice would be okay. Again, reserving the right to be wrong on that. But yeah,
Wouldn't you just be showing the house no different than showing it at an open house and you're not representing the buyer at that point?
that's kind of what I'm thinking, and that's why I'm thinking it's gonna be okay. But like I said, that determination is made in the last 5 minutes, so.
Well, and I think you brought it up before, that these agreements are for specific times, and that specific time can be an hour, a day, a week,
Right,
whatever.
whatever you and the buyer agree to in negotiation, yes.
When are these forms coming out for us to look at?
Great question for NMAR.
Because isn't Keller Williams doing the form and, Guard?
GAR is not, GAR has nothing to do with forms,
Okay,
it's all NMAR.
because that would help a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I have been talking with the NMAR Forms Committee about that the buyer agreement, that's not the buyer broker agreement, and imploring them to create one, because if they don't, then every brokerage is gonna have their own, and we end up with the Wild West. It'd be nice to have at least one standard one, yes.
Aren't we having, GAR having the first Wednesday, Kent, where Jen is going to be talking? They're having a panel. Is it in August?
Forms?
Yeah, it's in August.
Yeah, we're gonna have a forms panel. I'm not exactly sure when that's gonna be.
Give me a second.
It's August. But yeah, but they're gonna have like, they're gonna have the NAR settlement and the Gin for the forms committee.
Yeah,
and
we
I
did.
can't remember-
We did this last week.
Right, right, I was
And, you
there.
know, and I'm certain that we'll end up doing this a lot more times between now and then.
Oh,
The August first Wednesday is called Trends in the Marketplace, so I don't know if it's necessarily that one, but I know they're gonna have one.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Well,
Keep an eye
I-
on that.
Because I'm gonna leave.
NMAR is coming out with a shorter version of the buyer
Good.
broker agreement.
Good, thank you.
What the committee, Ashley and the Forms Committee have already drafted it, it then has to go to the executive committee at NMAR. And then it'll be on, NMAR's site. Is it NMAR or
Yeah.
Random?
And
I get lost. Then we have no control over when it goes out to the vendors. So, you know, maybe on SkySlope, it may be on Dotloop or Transaction Desk. We don't have control of that. And when we think of all the MLSs throughout the country who are making these changes, there's gonna be a lag. But you will be able to get it on Inmar.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all on that, waiting on that. So, if there isn't any other questions, I talked about value prop earlier, and all of you need to talk about your value prop. Well, guess what? I need to talk about my value prop. The association MLS needed the same thing, right? So I do just want to take a second, and one of the big questions that keeps coming up on this that I'm sure people in this room are asking, but are maybe too shy to ask is, why the hell should I still be a member of NAR? Right? So, I've already pointed out a couple things, you know, thing with the VA, the thing with the interested party contributions, the fact that the settlement exists and we didn't go bankrupt. Those are all good things. The other thing I like talking about with advocacy is, if you go to, it's nar.realtor/advocacy. I would normally pull it up, but I think it'd be too much of a pain to do right now, but, if you click on all federal issues and you click expand all, it shows all the different issues that NAR is working on every single year. And what I tell people is go through that list and just pick 3 at random, read them, and determine and think about what your business would look like if that wasn't true. One of my favorites, is there anybody in this room who actually wants to be a W-2? You kind of like your 1099 status, right? If you look at the IRS tax code, there is a specific carve out for 1099 for real estate brokers and agents. And every single year, the IRS wants to get rid of that, and every single year, the NAR fights it, and every single year, NAR has been winning. So that's one place that NAR is fighting. They probably don't do a good enough job telling you they're fighting. Every single, again, their marketing is terrible, but another one that I like, flood insurance. You know, the government these days likes playing their little game of shutting down the government, and we're all pawns in their big game now, right? Well, flood insurance is a part of that conversation every year where they're like, oh, we're gonna let this lapse. Well, I was like, guys, if you let this lapse even for one day, there's no guarantee we're getting it back. So that's another thing that NAR fights for every single year. So that advocacy piece of NAR is their biggest thing. It's their biggest value proposition. It's the #1 reason to stay involved. Lots of other benefits and stuff, but I'm not going to beat all those up. I put out a great video that goes through NAR, NMAR, GAR, and Southwest MLS, all the different benefits we have. So go check that out. But I did want to give Kent a second to talk about advocacy as well, because he is the government affairs director for GAR. And is actually the front lines of this kind of stuff. So go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. First of all, we're gonna miss you. Second of all, I'm looking for a hitman to sabotage his vehicle before he leaves town. Anybody want to volunteer? No, we'll miss you a lot, buddy. And I think he's done 7 years worth of work in 3.5 years. And we could probably actually coast for a little while and be okay. Till somebody gets trained up, probably not to the level of passion that you have for your job, but we really, really appreciate your service.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And I want to say too that Richard, the board, including Alice, Linda, Chris, who else is in here that's on the board or on a committee? Anybody on a board or committee?
Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, thank you for your service. Thousands of hours have been put towards this effort by both boards, GAR and Southwest MLS, by staff, and just trying to keep up with what's going on with this. So Richard's boiled it all down to, less than an hour presentation, which is pretty concise and really simplifies things. So, take that to heart. There's a lot of work that's gone into that. On the advocacy piece, he's right. There's a list a mile long of things that NAR has done for you and keeps doing every year. There's another list, a mile and a half long, about what's going on in our state and city. And we keep track of all those things as well. Couple of examples. Real estate contracts are under attack every single year in the legislature. If you don't follow it, you should. Because guess what? If we lose that as a part of our transaction options, we've lost a big chunk of our economy, literally. Not just your business. Yeah, your business is gonna suffer, but our economy will suffer. Because there are people that trade properties like for like. You guys know how that works. Real estate contracts and those kinds of things are super, super important. We fight for them every year in the legislature. And we have a good cadre of people that we've established relationships with, legislators. Many of you know that I spent 12 years in the state senate for District 21 here in Albuquerque. And so, you know, we've got a good team. We know the landscape between myself, Ashley, David Saavedra. We've got a great team that, you know, and we just need to keep that momentum in the legislature. Give you another example, rent control. Who likes that idea? None of us in this room. If you don't understand it, it sounds kind of, yeah, I'm sort of broke. I don't want to pay more rent. If they can control it, I'd be happy. But guess what? No developer's ever going to come back here and do a dadgum thing for us. And you'll have the same houses, no more inventory. And, you know, when the supply and demand really takes over, prices go up. So you've actually done the exact opposite of what you were intending to do. And you're hurting the people you're trying to help. It happens in government all the time, right, Linda? So.
Government, I'm here to help.
Yeah, scary, scary words. Just a couple of representations. As far as this whole lawsuit and settlement and everything, people that buy real estate frequently, maybe 3 or 4 times in 10 years or whatever it is, they know people want to get paid. They know they have to pay for this representation. This is not a surprise to them. People that are brand new buying their first home, they don't know anything. They know what you tell them. So the art is going to be in how you communicate this entire process. Well, the simpler, the better, I think. And like I said, Richard boiled it down to something pretty simple, I think. So the artist is in the presentation and how you explain it. And beyond that, a year from now, we're gonna be going, hey, this works pretty well. And it makes us sharper. It makes us better. It makes us communicate with it. Pick up the phone. God, when did we stop doing that? You know, it's okay. It's okay to communicate with each other. We're still a collaborative, competitive group of people, even within our own offices. You know, Robert's got one listing and somebody else in the office, Steve's gonna sell it. You're not competitors, really. You're trying to accomplish the same goal for different people. It's a beautiful relationship. It really doesn't exist anywhere else like this. And the fact that the compensation is now not going to be a part of the MLS really makes us focus on the consumer. Because everything we should think about every day should be consumer driven. Absolutely consumer driven. And I tell new member orientation is, who's ever had the misfortune of sitting through one of my little presentations during new member orientations? Wow.
Only one person will admit it.
It's actually on our board. Whoa. So I tell this all the time, you know, add value to yourself by understanding advocacy and what NAR, GAR, NMAR, what we're doing in that world, because it's significant. Contribute to RPAC, you know, $15 a year. It's not a big deal, but it's cheap insurance for your business to make sure that we have a team that understands the system, the process, and has the relationships to carry out and move forward with our objectives. And when rent control came up, we had been working on it for months before the session, literally months before the session, meeting with legislators. You know, I mean, I might as well have an account at IHOP or something. You know, we sit and we have coffee with them and we tell them, hey, rent control is not a great idea and this is why. Well, that's not what I thought. Well, think about it a little hard. Jerry Ortiz Pino is the Senate Public Affairs Chairman. He's been in the Senate. I think we got elected the same year, so he's been in 20 some odd years now. He's retiring this year. He's not going back. But we met with him early and we said, Senator, this is what rent control will do to the economy. He began to articulate that to his committee members. And the one committee that I thought would fly through and go right straight to the next committee, they stopped it dead in its tracks. So we didn't have rent control to deal with except for that one committee meeting in that session. Life was good. Because when things like that come up and they keep going from committee to House floor, committee, Senate floor, it's a drain. It's a drain on our resources. It's a drain on our relationships. So when we can kill a bill in the first committee, we're really, really happy. Just to let you know how important the advocacy piece of what we do really is. I'd like to see every Keller Williams, associate broker, qualifying all y'all need to contribute to RPAC. It's just that big a part of your business and very small. You know, when we're all on the Zoom screen, the Brady Bunch screen, don't leave it up to your neighbor to do that for you. It's really your responsibility as well. And 15, 25, but you know, I'm in for 1,000 a year. I've been a major investor for 10 or 12 years now. It's not a heavy lift, especially when you're making a little bit of money. But if you're not, you know, a little less will do. So it's the participation, it's the collaboration that really helps. So please consider that. You can do it right on your GAR portal. Rich, anything else?
No, I think we're over time now, so we do want to be respectful of your time. I will hang out if anybody has any other questions, but thank you for your time. Thank you, Alice, for having us. I always love this opportunity to talk face to face with people. And again, thank you all.